So, welcome to the Mod 2 overview. If you'll recall back 3 weeks ago, we were having a very similar conversation about Mod 1. You may remember that at the end of that overview, you couldn't really do any new things. This is going to be that exact same thing. We're getting an idea of what the code challenge looks like, where we're going, what the destination is, but you're not going to be able to follow along with this, like code-wise, so I would not recommend trying. We're going to talk about the standards that are in Mod 2. We're going to talk a little bit about how they're sequenced, and hopefully get an idea of what is involved with the code challenge. So before we get started, I'll say that of the 5 mods, yeah, probably even Mod 5, Mod 2 is the hardest. So a brief history of the mods. It's also the one that we do the most differently from the a traditional flat iron. All right, so the official mod schedule is Ruby, called Rack, Sinatra, Rails. JavaScript, React, capstones. So this is like the way that it's normally done at Flatiron. For a little over a year in Denver, we've been doing it pretty differently. So our mod 1 is almost identical. We resequence a couple things, but it's pretty straightforward. Also, our mod 4 is pretty darn close to standard. Our capstones were different, but recently, like last month, they're like, this is awesome. We love the way you do capstones. Everybody has to do capstones that way now. So go us. But our mod 2 and 3 are substantially different. So our mod, and the reason why is that after teaching the traditional mod 2 a couple times, Rack is a total fucking waste of time. Sinatra is a total fucking waste of time. And the parts of Rails that we were teaching in mod 2 are a total fucking waste of time. So we just cut all that stuff out. And that bought us an extra 3 weeks in a very short program that we can use everybody's time a little bit more effectively. So what we do instead are Rails, APIs, and HTML, CSS, JavaScript in mod 2. So you're in a full stack web development program. Mod 2 is full stack web development. We just do a little bit of all of it in mod 2. And then in mod 3 is now really mod 2 part 2. We do all of these same things with more depth. We add in more theory. We add in authentication. We add in like some of the more advanced parts of this, but it's all the same topics we did in mod 2. We just have more depth in them. And so another way to think of this is mod 2 is a mile wide and an inch deep. And then in mod 2, we're starting to add some of this depth. So there's a lot of things that we're going to do in mod 2 that aren't always going to make a ton of sense. That's fine. A lot of what we're doing is just getting some muscle memory on what these things are so that we can reflect on these more in mod 3 and get some of the depth on that. Coincidentally, your compatriots in mod 4 are having the exact opposite issue. Mod 4 is like 3 things, but they're incredibly difficult. So that's an inch wide and a mile deep. So That's kind of like the internet, like the comparative rigor of the next 3 mods of your life. Questions about these decisions, why we made them, what's coming up, any of that sort of stuff.
So on the Firebase site, is that just the traditional Flatiron,
Nope.
or is that the Denver specific one?
That's ours.
Okay.
Yeah, we're the only one who uses that site. Like me and
Gotcha.
Ahmed made it.
Cool.
Other questions about this? Cool. So let's take a look at the standards. So building APIs using Rails, websites with HTML and CSS, JavaScript, the DOM, fetch, talk a little bit about web and internet stuff, and forms. You can do all of these things. You can make a full stack web app. So let's talk, before I do the demo, let's talk about what I mean by full stack. So the stuff that you guys did in mod 1, a lot of it was just kind of getting your fingers wet, for lack of a better term, in programming. Now we're going to start doing the real stuff. So a full stack web app has a client, and it has a server. These don't mean the same thing, but you'll hear these used basically interchangeably. This is your browser. This is an API. So our client asks for things from the server with a technology called HTTP. HTTP comes back to the client or the browser and also say that, like, we're looking stuff up in the database with active record. Same thing you were doing in mod 1. So this is full stack. All the capstones you saw, all the mod 4 or mod 3 projects you saw basically have this shape to them. So this is where HTML, CSS, and JavaScript go. This is Rails. This was SQLite or Postgres. The rest of the program, this is basically what we're doing. Questions about this idea? All right, let's see it in action. So our first standard, building simple APIs using Rails. Come on, man. DC mod 2 overview. Okay, so I've got an empty folder, nothing up this sleeve, nothing up this sleeve. Let's make one of these Rails APIs. Place you're starting. So we're going to use a command called Rails new. It's going to make a new Rails app for us. Specify that we want an API, and we'll call it backend. Whoa, that's a whole lot of files it makes for us. So all the like crazy shit that goes into making a server, we get almost all of it for free. That's a powerful idea. That all the stuff to wire this up for us, including the database, all that stuff, we just get that. And then the only things we actually have to type are what's going to be specific to our app. So our app is going to be, let's do dogs. No relationships right now. We just have a dogs table. It's got some properties to it. We want to be able to look those up. We want to be able to add stuff. We want to be able to, that kind of thing. All right. So if I look in this folder that it made, man, this is a ton of files. That'd be fun to go exploring in there, but almost everything you care about is in this app folder. A couple things in this config folder, and that's kind of it. So we also have things called generators that are going to make files for us. So I can say something like Rails G model dog, and it will make these files for us. It's pretty cool. So I take a look at those files that it made. Whoa, this looks kind of familiar. We did this sort of shit in Mod 1. So we can say what a dogs table should include. So it might have something like a name, maybe an age, something like that. And then it also made this models file for us. That's where we could put has many, belongs to, all the stuff we were doing in Mod 1. That could go in there, or we can just leave it alone. Cool. So I have a model. Now I'm going to make a route. So this is saying I want to be able to handle these HTTP requests and tell it where that request should go. So I say any GET request to dogs should go to a dogs controller's index action. We'll talk about what all those words mean right up front this week. So, all right, that's where I want to send that request. Then I can say, hey, Rails, why don't you give me a controller for dogs? I want to take, yeah, let's compare that with this thing that I did. I want to take this to the dogs controller's index action. This is the dogs controller. This is the index action. So if you make a web request to that URL, this is the method that's going to get called. So I could say something like, cool, give me all the dogs. Hey, shit, that's the same thing we were doing in Mod 1. Yeah. Then I can say, I want you to send that thing from the database back as JSON. Neat. If I go over to these seeds, they even give us a folder that's got seeds ready to go for us. You do something like dog.create. Bixby. Mesa. These dogs are long gone, FYI. And then I can say, hey, Rails, can you migrate my database? Sure thing, Kyle. Can you seed my database? Already done. Cool. Can you run this server that I just made? Wow. So if I go to localhost 3000/dogs, check out what happens. Weird. That's like the same kinds of APIs that we saw in the projects for Mod 1. And now you can make them yourself. This is your first goal in in Mod 2 is to be able to do the thing that I just did. Build a simple API using Rails. And lots of awesome things for this, and so many videos, so many videos for building APIs with Rails. And that is this part of our stack. Ask me some questions. All right. Let's say that I wanted to make those dogs show up on a web page. That's our next standard. Building websites with HTML and CSS. So I'm going to stop that server. I'm going to get out of the thing that I just made. We're going to make a completely separate folder. We're going to call it front end. And I'm going to make an index.html page. I'm going to make an app.css. So now I've got two empty files in this folder. All right. If I go into index.html, I think you did some of this kind of stuff in your pre-work. HTML has a head and a body. Has character set, has a title. Those are the required parts of an HTML page for it to be a valid page. So if I want to make that style sheet, that CSS file that I made, I want that to work in here. Link rel style sheet. href. Cool, it's done. I could put a list of dogs in here. And if in that app.css file, I can style this. I could say that I want each of those, like each of these list items, that's what the LI stands for, have a bottom margin of 16 pixels. I can say that I want the color of all the text on the page to be like a blue-gray. So that's blue. This is a little bit desaturated. And that's pretty dark. So we can apply some styling to this page. Now if I served this up, like so, hey, cool. So I've got stuff showing up on the web page. I can go to a URL. I can see the thing. That is HTML and CSS. So the two things that I just did, you should be like crazy solid on by the end of the week. In fact, we were just talking about this in the morning staff meeting. This is roughly the shape of like week 1 here. We're gonna spend a little bit of time on Rails, and like while we're working on that, we'll probably pick up HTML and CSS kind of in here. We usually go a lot deeper with the CSS. It's not a part of the Flatiron curriculum at all, but it's important. But since we have a short week next week, we're probably going to push a lot of the CSS sorts of parts of it to week 3. But HTML stuff have to get. Really not much else we can do in Mod 2 without it. So in this next part where we start bringing in some JavaScript, that works like this. Make a JavaScript file. So now I have these 3 files in this folder. If I want to link it to that HTML page that I made, I can say cool. So now I have an HTML page that links in a CSS page, links in a JavaScript file. So with JavaScript, we could, instead of hard coding in these dogs, we can do that with programming also. We could say that my dogs are in this array. So I can make an array of hashes. They're called objects in JavaScript, but they're the same thing. They're not the same thing as objects in Ruby. They're the same thing as hashes in Ruby. They just wanted to make it as confusing as possible. We can do some actually kind of cool shit. Like we can turn these dogs into dog HTML elements. We call them DOM elements. If I wanted to turn an array of 2 dogs into an array of 2 dog elements, how would we do that in Ruby? Starts with an M?
Map.
Map. What do you know? It's the same thing in JavaScript. So I can say, I want these dogs to be these new HTML elements. I can even do string interpolation. Syntax is a little bit different, but idea is exactly the same. Cool. Now I made a whole bunch of dog elements. I can also reference things that are on this page, like that. So I could say that that UL is that. And I want to take each of my dogs, I want to each through them. And for each one of them, I want to add them to my page. Like that. All right. So now I should be able to take out these ones that I hard coded. So my HTML doesn't have any dogs. My JavaScript adds the dogs. All right. Hey, look, and there they are. Now, why would you do such a thing, Kyle? What sense does that make? Well, we just did some basic programming proficiency with JavaScript, and we created and manipulated DOM nodes. That's what those little JavaScript elements were. And fetch. Fetch is where the whole world comes together. So let's say I run this Rails server. Let's say, oops. All right, so let's run this Rails server. Let's run this front end. All right, cool. Now in my JavaScript file, instead of hard coding these dogs, I'm going to pull them out of my database. So the way that I do that is by fetching them. I say, hey, can you go over to localhost 3000/dogs? I want you to treat the thing you get back as JSON, turns it from JSON into a JavaScript object. And then take these dogs that I get back and do all this shit with it. Cool. So oops, one more thing I forgot in the Rails app. So this is there's a couple things. There's a lot of things we do in Mod 2. You just got to memorize, and this is one of them. You're going to uncomment out that thing, and you're going to uncomment out this thing, and you're going to change this to this. Ta-da, done. And then we'll restart that Rails server. All right. Hey, look, that's from my database. Holy shit, I made a full stack app. That's retrieving data using fetch. Describing how the web and the internet work is being able to talk about this diagram right here. And then the last thing that we need to be able to do to be successful in Mod 2 is submit data using forms. And that looks like this. Go back over that HTML file, and let's say we want to be able to add new dogs whenever we want. So we make a form. That someone can fill out. To add their dog. So the forms that you see on the internet are by and large just this. We can go, ah, God, that's so butt ugly. That sounds like a problem for CSS. So I can say I want all inputs and labels to be blocked. Ah, getting better. I want all inputs to have a margin bottom of 16 pixels. Ah, getting better. I want them to also have some more padding. Ah, getting better. I want the form to be 300 pixels wide. I don't want all these to take up all of that. Ah, now why aren't these the same width? Because of another stupid CSS thing you just kind of have to memorize. So this is box. Cool. So we have a slightly better looking form. And then what we're going to tell it to do is send an HTTP request to that Rails server that we made. And back over in our router, we will say intercept that request and send it to the dogs controllers create action. And we go back over here. We say that the dog was dog.create. Its name is params name. And its age is params age. So we make the dog, and then we're going to effectively refresh the page. All right, let's see if it works. So can I add Pooch, a spry 6-year-old? Why, yes, I can. And if I refresh the page, Pooch is still there. That's the code challenge. Made an API using Rails. We built a website. We did a little bit of Dribble script. We made elements with JavaScript. We retrieved stuff from an API. We talked about that diagram, and we submitted data using forms. That is a full stack app. Ta-da! Ask me some questions.
What's a shortcut to delete an entire word
In Vim?
in VS Code?
Oh, I don't know how to do it in VS Code.
Oh.
In Vim, it's DW, like that. I'm sure that VS Code has an equivalent command. VS Code delete.
I think it's option delete.
Beautiful. Delete forward and backward. Deleting from the cursor to the end of line, Control K. Alt delete. And Alt backspace.
Awesome, thanks.
Other questions?
Can you show your weekly layout on what we should be focusing on this first week?
Yep. Next couple days, Rails. Get this Rails stuff down. We don't want to spend too much time on it because the hardest thing that we do is easily this DOM stuff. That stuff is just an intellectual workout. We'll spend a little bit of time on that. We definitely want to get to the DOM stuff by the end of the week so that your brains can be percolating over the weekend about that. Those are the two heavy ones.
Would you recommend we do some like JavaScript review?
Mm-hmm. And how? I know that was like part of your pre-work, but chances are we're gonna need a lot of refresher on how JavaScript works. Totally normal.
And the place to start is Firebase. Start working through there. Okay.
Yep. You'll notice there isn't an assessment for the Rails one. Make a database table, be able to add stuff, be able to read stuff. That's it. That's the assessment. And again, mountains of videos on that stuff.
Hey Kyle, my internet was cutting out a bit. Did you say the code challenge is being pushed out by a day because of the holiday?
So normally we do code challenge starting on Wednesdays because we have hackathon on Tuesday. And everybody fucking complains about like the shorter week with hackathon already. I don't think we're going to move that because it's the 2 hackathon days are probably the most educational days in the entire program. They like significantly help with locking in stuff. This is when most people say like the scope of the program finally made sense to them was on this day. But yeah, it usually ends up being abbreviated. We might push it out to Monday, but I don't know yet. Every other campus does one-shot code challenges. You do them once on Friday. When we were in person, everybody would get corralled into a room. They'd have a big fucking clock up on the wall. They would like count down minutes, and there'd be like a pencils down. I saw some teacher who got really bent out of shape that someone had headphones on, like yanked them off. It was like, what if there was secret messages? What if they were cheating with such bullshit? But we're the only campus that does multiple code challenge attempts anyway. But yeah, we usually do fewer of them in Mod 2 just for schedule reasons.
My computer cut out when you were saying what to uncomment out when you're in the gem section.
Oh yeah, we'll talk about that more, but it's this rack cores.
Okay.
Then you go over to the cores, then you go over to the cores file, and then come out this stuff.
Okay. Awesome. Thank you.
Other questions about what we're doing in Mod 2?
Oh, sorry. Did you mention what we were doing for the project? Like
Make a web app.
make a web app, yeah. And
That's
that's paired again.
Yeah, you'll have another. It'll be another group project.
Cool.
You guys mentioned blog posts before. When are we
Yeah.
supposed to do those, and what are they again?
Great question. So the TLDR is you need to have 5 blog posts done by graduation to be eligible for the money back guarantee. All the details on that is Brian's thing, but we generally like expect you to have a blog post done at the end of every mod. It's way easier than writing 5 of them the day before graduation. So after every project, I would recommend writing your blog post then. All right, so what are the requirements for a blog post? It should be blog post length. It should be blog post tone. It should be about blog post kinds of topics. It should be posted somewhere where, like you've seen blogs before, right? One of those. It can be about technical topics. It can be about non-technical topics. So non-technical topics are like, here's what I learned about pair programming working for a week with a partner. They can be like, oh man, did I learn a lot about scoping projects? They can also be like, hey, I went to this, I was so scared I wasn't gonna be able to learn this thing. And then I put my head down and totally figured it out. Here's my 3 crazy tricks. Number 2 will make you shit. Your technical stuff can be like, hey, I just learned how to add cores to HTTP responses in Rails. Here's how. But you want a collection of these by the time you graduate, and it's not just something like career services is doing to fuck with you. People read these things, and they're like very helpful in your job search. And when you do your declared job search, I think you have to do one every week. So if writing blog posts makes you anxious, general guideline that we'd recommend is spend half an hour drafting, spend half an hour editing, ship it. Like, these aren't something to like knock yourself out over. Yeah, about an hour, maybe a little bit less, maybe a little bit more, somewhere in there. Put it on Medium, put it on Dev2, you can put it on your own personal site, you can put it on LiveJournal, I don't know, wherever you want. And then send Brian the link. I think there's a spreadsheet where they go, but that's a Brian thing. What else?
So I'm sorry, I guess I was a little confused about the code challenge. Was that Thursday or Friday?
It'll probably be Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. We might tack Monday on there also. But it's somewhere in here. It's after the hackathon, at least to the end of next week, but we might tack an extra day on.
Can you talk about the hackathon a little bit more? Like what we do?
Sure. So for the hackathon, that is a group project where you are paired with Mod 4 students. So we've done it a few different ways, but it'll probably do about 2 of you and about 2 of them. And you guys will make a full stack web app together. They're going to make a React front end. You are going to make a Rails back end. And then the last few times we've done it, Mod 2 students have also been more involved in the styling and stuff as well. But you'll get a chance to like build a project with somebody who's been in the program 6 weeks longer than you. And so we'll start in the morning. We'll give you a theme, and you build whatever you can in a day with that theme. And then there are tea and medals around 3 o'clock, and everybody presents their projects, and that's the hackathon. And then you'll do it again in Mod 4 as a Mod 4 student. Yeah, that was a pure Brian invention, and was like maybe one of the single best things in the program, those 2 days. Other questions?
Hey Kyle, just a question on the Firebase site.
Yeah.
For my Firebase, anytime I click on any of like
I know where you're going with this. Check this out.
it gets me back to mod 1.
So if you find that happening where you click on one of these links and it just refreshes the page or something like that. So what you want to do, motherfucker. You'll want to go into LearnCo and change your track. So you'll switch the materials here. Now, if you'll recall, this is one tricky thing. Listen up, because no matter how many times I say this, I'm going to get 3 messages about it in the next hour. So I told you that we do mod 2 and 3 a little bit differently. You have to look at which mod the Learn Lab that you're trying to do is in. So if you look down at that URL, it'll be like, this one is Web Development Immersive 2.0 Module 2. This one is Web Development Immersive 3.1 Module 3. Most of these, like 90% of them, are in Mod 3 curriculum. A couple of them are in Mod 2. And just like you switch from the pre-work to Mod 1 material, luckily you don't have a million of these like I do, but you need to make sure that you are in the course materials for whichever one you're trying to go to.
So follow the rubric in the Firebase, but then go to LearnCo.
So refresher, the Firebase site, that's like a Denver specific thing that we do to organize the curriculum into standards. It's got Learn Labs, it's got videos, it's got third-party stuff. It's got links to the assessments. So like Learn is just one of the many tools that you have for this stuff, and we coordinate all of it with the Firebase thing. More questions? Cool. Keep in mind that there are a gaggle of Rails videos. Unfortunately, like the Rails stuff in particular is like a little bit light on Learn. Lots of like good JavaScript stuff though, tons of good JavaScript stuff. But between these two things, you should stay pretty damn busy today. Feel free to use tech questions, work together, hang out in a room together, and your goal is to try to be able to serve something up from Rails and be able to add something to Rails, like in the next 2 days. Last call for questions. Cool. Go learn something.
Thank you.
Thanks, Kyle.
Cheers.
Thanks.